Everybody, welcome to the Hoop Southbound Show. Obviously, going into the Elite Eight, we are going to talk about Alabama advancing and Tennessee advancing. Two fantastic outcomes for this SEC fan base. David, you got any thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah, certainly. So, first, this is a mustache. Second, this is a pickle. And third, there it is. This is a pickled habanero that's been soaking in 6 different types of spices. And I will tell you what all three of these things have in common today on the Hoop Southbound Show. So, first off, incredible wins by both teams. Now in their way into the Elite Eight. We'll take this the same way we did as last week. We're going to start with Thursday night, move on to what happened tonight on Friday night, and then you guys get to watch it all on Saturday morning when this thing pops up. But let's go ahead and let's start out with this incredible win that Alabama had against North Carolina. Huge upset, Maddie. This was not expected, nor had any way the way that Bama had played in the past just really suggested that this was coming. Now, North Carolina, obviously a team that could get knocked off, and actually the 2-1 seeds that I felt would be the ones knocked out first, Houston and North Carolina, both get knocked out in the same round. But for Alabama, they played great. This was a game I felt in a lot of ways that the adjustments that took place in the second half, Nate Oates outcoached Hubert Davis and won this game that way. And then second, huge performance hit the mustache for Grant Nelson, who played his best game of the season for Alabama on the biggest stage that they've had so far. Maddie, your thoughts on the North Carolina-Alabama game? We'll dig into it here a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So I actually went to sleep like halfway through this game, could not make it through the game.
Oh my
Woke
God, really? Come on.
and was shocked. Alabama was no way playing in that first half like they were gonna win and be able to make it to the Elite Eight. So I woke up, watched, the recap, and like you said, it was just kind of a chess match between Davis and Oates. And obviously Oates hit the checkmate. Alabama hit some massive, massive shots in that game. And like you said, Grant Nelson, absolutely huge game for him. I've kind of been iffy on him this season, but this game kind of solidified why it was such a big deal of him going to Alabama and the contributions that he made that they really haven't had out of a big man this season.
Yeah, no, he stepped up into that 5 role like they've been needing. We called him the X factor last week. We said like Nick Pringle and Grant Nelson have to be the difference in this game if they're going to beat North Carolina. And Nick Pringle took on a lot of the defensive burden against Armando Bacot, and Grant Nelson steps up his game. Huge in this one. 12 rebounds in this game, 24 points, several blocks, just a huge game for Grant Nelson overall. And he played strong late, even got the game defining when it was still three, North Carolina has a Hail Mary shot left, after that missed free throw for a shot to try to win this game. Grant Nelson blocks that too. So why not? It's just kind of that night. But overall, what I felt made the biggest difference. Now, Grant Nelson's performance aside, because Grant Nelson was amazing when he had to be amazing. Going 10 for 13 for the free throw line, 6 from 9 from the field, like incredible game for Grant Nelson. Didn't miss from 3 when he shot a 3. Just a huge night for him. But what I felt like is at the beginning in this first half of this game, North Carolina and Alabama are running. They're both shooting over 50%. They're lighting up the court. Everything's dropping overall, except for one player, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But like everything seems to be working out and offensively, but neither team is stopping the other team really. There were a period where it looked like North Carolina was starting to get a little bit stronger on defense. But Alabama was still right there in it. And there was a point where in this game, North Carolina led this game is by as many as 10 points. And that felt like to me the moment it's like, okay, North Carolina is about to take over because they're a better defensive team than Alabama. Well, they may be the better defensive team on most nights, but they were not in this game. And Nate Oates challenged the opportunities for Armando Baycott, and also forced the ball out of the hands of their players. He made a lot of adjustments coming out of the locker room that made it tough to score for North Carolina. And there were several times where I was just looking at the TV. It's like, why isn't North Carolina driving the basketball? Why are they not driving they're back and forth, back and forth. But yeah, truthfully, this was an upset. Like 100%, this was an upset. This is not the expected result. Bama fans were content with the Sweet 16 and said, all right, we're playing with house money now. Let's see how far we can get in this thing. No one's really expecting a win. They're wanting a win, but no one's expecting it. And honestly, 7 out of 10 times, I still believe North Carolina beats Alabama. But in this game, this is that one time. This is that one time when it matters most. And looking back at this game, North Carolina is going to be kicking themselves. I mean, kicking themselves for some of the mistakes that took place and just some of their key players just not performing. First off, you know what game took place before this one? It was Clemson and Arizona on the same court. Caleb Love, who transferred over from North Carolina to Arizona this offseason, has an opportunity to play against his old team. Caleb Love doesn't hit a three-pointer at all for Arizona in that game against Clemson. Fast forward to our North Carolina-Alabama game. RJ Davis, who has literally hit a three-pointer in every game, at least one three-pointer in every game this season for North Carolina, goes 0 for 9 from 3 in this game. And it wasn't just all contested shots. He missed some that were wide open too. And you're just like, that ball is not falling tonight. There was something in the air. I don't know if all the Tide fans collectively who were there in Los Angeles just took a breath together or what it was, but literally RJ Davis doesn't hit a single shot. They make a really stupid play late in the game. Their late game execution throughout the entire portion of this North Carolina just didn't execute at all. They rushed a 3-point shot at one point out of a timeout, I believe it was. Just inbound, you rush a 3-point shot with plenty of time on the shot clock and plenty of time that you could be milking off with a lead against Alabama. And they left the door wide open for Alabama's offense to have a chance to come back. And that's not a recipe for winning. And North Carolina really let Alabama get where they wanted. Alabama did what they needed to do. They capitalized and they executed when it was time. But North Carolina is going to be looking back at this game. And this isn't to take anything away from the Tide, but if you're a North Carolina fan and you're on that North Carolina team, you are kicking yourself for your last 4 minutes of this basketball game because that cost you a chance to go to the Elite Eight. But Alabama makes school history on this one. And yeah, Maddie, just some other general thoughts I want to hit on Alabama. This Alabama team, we know about their flaws on defense. We know that they lost 2 NBA first rounders this season from Brandon Miller, and they lost Noah Clowney to the NBA draft. They also lost JQ to the transfer portal this offseason. And the front court outside of Grant Nelson even coming in, we weren't really sure what the offensive production would be 100%. There were some concerns about their front court. This Alabama team is less talented than the team that Alabama had last year that was the #1 overall team in the tournament. But this team passed the test. And this team is the one who makes school history and gets the second biggest win in Alabama history. And the reason I'm calling this the second biggest win in Alabama history is because the last time they made the Elite Eight, that was against the reigning champs in Syracuse. So this was an amazing win for the Tide, picking up the second biggest win in school history. But I think honestly, and you can agree or disagree with me on this, Maddie, at 100%, or you can add to it. I think the reason that even though this is the less talented team for Alabama, what Nate Oates has been able to do in his entire tenure at Alabama is create consistently winning teams. And eventually, just like he's a math guy who believes in analytics and really what analytics is about is probability, the probability if you make a winning team year after year after year, eventually the chips, the cards at the blackjack table land the proper way and you finally get that game-winning shot, or you finally get that one moment, or you get that one night that the other team's not executing and you have the team that can. consistently building a winning program finally gets you to where you want to go. But thoughts on that, because like this was excellent, and I'm ready to declare Nate Oates the greatest coach in Alabama basketball history.
Yeah, for sure. Just to kind of add on to that, because I think you make a great point. I think a lot of it also has to do with the experience. You have some of those
Absolutely.
players that played last year, Mark Sears being one of the main guys there. Obviously, Grant Nelson on a different team, but has that experience. And now Coach Oates has more of that coaching experience to kind of get him through those difficult moments, like we talked about, and being able to outcoach legendary Hubert Davis. So, you know, I think a lot of it has
There
to
is a
do
strong
with
term for Hubert Davis. Like as a player, yes.
that's where I was going. Don't disrespect to the man.
Yeah,
He's
yeah. Roy Williams
uh,
is a legend.
but when you look at the fact that they're consistently building, but also adding more and more experience to the lineup, you had a lot of people who had never been there before last season, and that you could see the flaws in that. Like we say, experience helps you win in March, and it's very obvious with this Alabama team. It's been helpful.
Late game situation, you got a experienced senior like Grant Nelson with the ball executing late in the game. And then you had Mark Sears also playing an outstanding basketball game. You got Aaron Estrada, who's been on very good Hofstra teams, transferring to this program as well. You got Nick Pringle, who's a returner from this program. There's a lot of guys who executed. Like the freshmen in this game, you know, Sam Walters had 5 points. Jaron Stevenson had nothing. And it's not a diss on them. They contributed in their own ways, as they did throughout the game. Stevenson grabbed 4 boards and an assist. Walters added on an offensive element from the field, but the guys who were more experienced, you're right, were the ones who made the biggest contributions in this. And actually, I do believe, yeah, I am right. North Carolina's bench actually outplayed Alabama's bench in this game as well. So the right guys stepped up for Alabama. And you're right. It's the experienced players, the guys who have been there, done this, and some of the guys like Mark Sears who were left last year going, we were this close. We were this close. And they got the job done. It was fantastic in this game. So a lot of great stuff happening in this. And yeah, my dog Joey's bracket with Alabama as national champions continues. So that brings up my second item here, the habanero. We've been talking about this for a while about me eating a habanero. If Alabama wins a national championship, I will eat that habanero that's been soaked in vinegar and 4 different types of peppers. That's hot. That's a really hot habanero. So if Alabama wins it, I'll do it. I'll do it just for the content. So that'll be great. That'll be my celebration. But yeah, the mustache and the habanero are on the table right now for
Christian
Alabama.
is taking screenshots, getting all the receipts together for that moment.
They got to win a national championship. It's not me picking against them, but like, I'm still picking UConn, but right now, yeah, no offense to Alabama, but if they win a national championship, 100% I will eat that habanero. Just for the celebratory moment of it. Anytime an SEC team wins, I'll do something stupid, but I'll come up with something for Tennessee if they advance. I'll come up with it for next week. But yeah, they're kind of the team that we thought would be here a little bit more was Tennessee, but Alabama, huge upset win and this one. But let's talk about their game with Clemson. Now, first off, with both the teams, Tennessee and Alabama, again, getting to Tennessee in a minute, they're both facing teams they faced back in November and lost to. That's crazy how this has worked out in the Elite Eight, is that one of these teams they want to go to a Final Four has to seek redemption. But for Alabama, it's against the Clemson team they lost to in the ACC SEC Challenge, one that honestly a lot of Tide fans didn't think was going to be that competitive with it being in Coleman and, the way that Clemson had played the year prior. Turned out Clemson was pretty darn good, and they're still proving it again in the NCAA tournament. They were kind of a middle of the pack, but we're going to be an NCAA team in the ACC this year. But, in that prior matchup, guys like Shefflin, PJ Hall, and Gerard were huge for Clemson in that game. But if you look at the team sheet, it was a pretty even matchup. Of course, back then in November, Clemson won 85-77. Maddie, what are you expecting out of the rematch?
I think this is going to be much more of I don't want to say a rock fight, but more of an evenly fought battle than what we saw I mean, looking like you said, looking at the team stats from the earlier game, um, I mean, Clemson was on, just shooting lights out as compared to Alabama in the 30% range, with Clemson at 50. So, I think we see, like you said, Nate Oates, the math guy, the analytics guy, is gonna take all that and he's gonna run with it. He is gonna figure out what went wrong in that first go around, especially at home. Um, was the big thing. But then I think he's gonna look a lot at, PJ Hall and the game that Grant Nelson just had and kind of size those up, see if it's possible for him to play that kind of game again, what he's gonna get out of him. And then with Hunter and Gerard, who they need to put on them. If you're gonna have Mark Sears, if you're gonna go in, have, maybe Rylan Griffin, or Estrada after his great game today, what those matchups are gonna look like and what gives them, the best opportunity to get a win and advance to a Final Four.
I felt like with the way that Clemson played against Arizona, and they've played every one of their tournament games so far, mostly the same. Clemson's in the driver's seat. And when they beat Alabama and Coleman, this team was in the driver's seat. You were getting consistent contribution from PJ Hall. You shot 53% from the field. The only area that you had some disappointment, if you're a Clemson fan, was the free throw line was a little shaky, going 2 for 3 for there. It wasn't 2 for 3, but overall, reduced the fraction. Shooting 66.7% from the stripe is not ideal, but you dominated the paint plus 10. You found those consistent buckets, and that's how they've been winning tournament games. That, and along with great defense, and that first matchup with Alabama. Alabama only shot 34% from the field and 31% from three on 35 3-pointers. So there's some concern, that this could drive almost the exact same way. So if you're Alabama, you got to learn from this tape and you've got to figure out what you did wrong in that matchup. And a big portion of that is still that ongoing conversation. Yes, they got this huge win against Armando Bacot. They finally beat a big man, outside of the SEC, which was the thing they were struggling with all through November and December. And then Janai Broome played excellent against them and against Auburn. Tolu Smith was the only one I really had marked down that they had this incredible game against a dominant big. But we also know Tolu Smith was returning to injury this season. So he had flashes at times where he was Tolu Smith from last year. But overall, you've got to figure this at what you did wrong and correct it. That's the biggest thing to me. Now, we talked about X factors. Again, the X factor in this game is Grant Nelson, and it's going to be Nick Pringle and Grant Nelson. Those guys have to step up in that front court, and if Grant Nelson plays exactly like he did at the level he played at against North Carolina, Alabama can win this basketball game. If he doesn't, it could be a big night for PJ Hall. That's going to be the challenge. That's going to be the challenge, because you've got a good front court in Clemson that plays good defense, and you've got your guards who can match up well there. The big question is, can you beat another dominant big 2 games in a row? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, definitely big factors there. Like you said, PJ Hall, one of the best producers for Clemson. And then in the back court, like we talked about, you got Gerard and Hunter. One of the big things I noticed looking back at that UNC game, um, Alabama guarding off of screens was not good. And I guarantee that something Clemson is going to try and take full advantage of. UNC had a couple of wide open shots. And like you said, if RJ Davis hit a couple of those, we'd be probably talking about a different ending for that Alabama team. So definitely something that Nate Oates is going to have to pay attention to, especially with the guards like Gerard and Hunter, out front in the backcourt.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great one, though. You're sitting on the other side of that, looking ahead, on the just north of you on the bracket, just looking up at you. You've got UConn and Illinois sitting there. That's going to be a great offensive basketball game there coming out of that one. But certainly you would prefer Illinois, because good grief, UConn's doing it again. They're steamrolling through everybody. So that'll be the thing to keep your eye on, who that other matchup is. But this is going to be a tough game in the Final Four if they make it. But whoever makes this game, it's going to be the same for Clemson too. But they're going to be like, man, if that's UConn, you would prefer Illinois. Both teams would prefer Illinois,
Yeah.
especially because Illinois, even though they're hot right now and playing better, you still know that defense is shaky at times. So we'll see. All right, Maddie. The other game that was on tonight, and the reason that we're having to record past midnight tonight was this very, I'm not going to call it a dominant performance by Tennessee, because what it was is a tight game for a long time in this one.
Mhm.
And then finally, Tennessee goes on, make an instant defense, or a defense into instant offense, and Tennessee goes on an 18-0 run. Creighton kind of chips back away. They're just working on it the best they can after that huge defensive to offense run that, Tennessee's getting transition buckets on like crazy. Out of fast break points in this game, Tennessee was plus 12 on Creighton in this one. So yeah, they worked on it and tried to chip away, got it close. It's looking a little shaky. Like maybe Creighton's going to come back on them. They're a pretty good offensive team and they don't foul much. Tennessee figures out a way in this one. And really, it was guys like Dalton Knecht who had to make some late game free throws in this one to take it over. Maddie, what did you see from this Creighton Tennessee game?
Like you mentioned, that 18-0 run, obviously a very pivotal point in this game for Tennessee because it was back and forth. I think right before halftime, they'd said they had 8 lead changes. Um, so obviously a huge difference there. Um, Standout defense from the Vols, making room for absolutely no easy shot for the Blue Jays. You mentioned Dalton Knecht having a great offensive night as always, but he showed some defensive prowess, a lot of contribution to that, like you said, quick defense to offense and transition points. But Zakai Ziegler, some fantastic passing. And then another note to that, I think it was up until either the 7 minute or 6 minute left mark, Tennessee only had 2 turnovers.
Yep. Yeah, they played great. Like overall, like the game was very much in the Vols' hands. I really wasn't panicked when at halftime for Tennessee at all. Like I felt like this is kind of comfortable. This isn't bad. This is not the worst case that you could be sitting on in this situation. Down one at half with a very good offense on the other end. You're just kind of waiting for your offense to keep clicking and humming along. And by the way, one of the things that we looked at is that Tennessee's kind of been shooting a little bit poorer from three, as soon as it became March. In this game, not a problem. Not a problem. 11 3-pointers in this game on 24 attempts, 45%, 45.8%. Actually outshot Creighton from three in this game. My biggest concern, though, was what tonight, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit coming up their matchup with Purdue, was that Kalkbrenner just seemed to be beating Jonas Adu. I don't know if Adu was having a bad game or what it was, but there were just times like neither Awako or Adu were an offensive threat in that game, with Kalkbrenner playing defense on them. And then Kalkbrenner just had moments where he just could make a skill move and get past them or do what he needed to do. But yeah, I really don't know what the problem was in the front court. So tonight, but yeah, together combined, Awaka and Edey, 9 points tonight, and they had a grand total of 9 rebounds. That's great for a single player. That'd be a darn good night. But like overall, that was both of their big men combined in this one. Then JP Australia also having to get some minutes in this game and figure things out. I will say this, and this comes down to my pickle. They were in a pickle tonight because Santiago Vescovi missed in this game with the flu. So that also played a contribution on how Rick Barnes had to figure out how they were going to win this game. So, same song and dance there. They figured it out though tonight and played a pretty good game overall.
Yeah, for sure. Something that was a little concerning, they kept trying to foul Meshack out, giving him the wrong players fouls.
Well,
One of the
Waka, yeah.
weirdest portions of this game, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, Meshack, oh, that's his fourth." No, wait, no, it's not. So I don't know if that puts some bad juju on Adu and Awaka because they kept getting no foul calls and then transitioned to more foul calls. So I think they may have been a little confused down low as to what was going on. So I'm not really sure there. Not trying to make any excuses, but hopefully they get that thing figured out with the ref situation before this matchup with Purdue, because it is going to be rough.
Yeah, you got to do a little bit better. You got to do a little bit better if you're the refs, making sure you're putting the fouls on the right players. I got to correct it each time. But yeah, it was just a strange overall situation. But once again, just returning to this conversation, we all know the story of Rick Barnes and the whole conversation of Rick Barnes can't win in March. Rick Barnes can't win in March. Who can't win in March? Because Rick Barnes finally gets past the Sweet 16 with Tennessee and they return to the Elite Eight for the second time in school history. This time, it's the first time since Bruce Pearl was coach at Tennessee, which I found it kind of interesting that Bruce Pearl was sitting at the desk at TBS or True TV or wherever you watch this once they had it on multiple channels. He's sitting at the desk talking about this game tonight as one of the one of the desk commentators, and just a fitting evening for this just moment in Tennessee history where they have once again looks to be like one of their best seasons in school history right here. Incredible win again, one of the top 3 wins in Tennessee basketball history tonight, and probably I would say it's 1 or 2. I'd have to go back and look. But yeah, they make history this evening, and here they are in the Elite Eight. So it's a big moment for Tennessee. But yeah, it's one of those things. Rick Barnes has consistently, just like Nate Oates, built good teams. He's built good teams consistently. They've been a good team in the SEC for a minute now. Eventually, this stuff is going to happen where you're finally going to beat the team that you're supposed to beat. You're supposed to beat and get to that Elite Eight. And it went rather chalky in the Midwest region, but they still managed to get the job done. Now they're sitting with a rematch with Purdue in their sights. A game that we saw them play in Maui, which was a very, very good basketball game. But just like I was talking about a minute ago, in that front court with Adu and Awaka kind of struggling against Kalkbrenner, they're going to have to deal with Zach Edey in this game. And back then in November, Adu had 5 points and he had 1 rebound. And then Awaka had in that game 6 points and 1 rebound. 11 points and 2 rebounds. This is going to cut it out of your 2 primary players in the front court against Zach Edey and this Purdue team. I'm not concerned about the backcourt for Tennessee, but front court definitely raises some red flags to me. That was a 4-point game between these two last time. Can Tennessee do better in the front court in this game and figure out how they're going to tackle Zach Edey and get their front court going in this basketball game? Maddie, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm interested to see how this matchup is going to shake out. Like you said, we saw them back in Maui. Terrible shooting performance from both teams. So I'm interested to see if, it kind of goes the same way both defenses pick up and nobody's going to be able to make a bucket like last go around. They actually both had the same 3-point percentage in the last game, 26.7. And then Purdue edged out Tennessee by almost 2 percentage points at 35. So I mean, nothing spectacular, and like you said, the rebounds, were the difference maker. They were abysmal on Tennessee's side of the ball, so, definitely something to pay attention to. Like you said, Adu and Awaka, that's gonna be a hard fight, with Zach Edey because, at this point, I assume that he would be slowing down, wouldn't be able to get it done. We'll see how he recovers and gets back out there, on Sunday, but I'm really interested in looking at the matchup of Zakai Ziegler and Smith. It's going to be an excellent matchup between those two, both such high IQ playing point guards for these teams. So, after the night that Ziegler had against the, why am I blanking on
Oh,
the
I
name?
think he was moved on to Alexander. Yeah, I get where you're going. Right? It's late. It's after midnight. Again, everybody with us recording. But yeah, no, like he had to guard. Guarded Alexander at one point. He had to guard Ashcraft at one point. Or he guarded multiple people tonight on Creighton in this game. So yeah, I'm with you. That matchup between Braden Smith and Zakai Ziegler are going to be very interesting. Braden Smith had 6 points in that game against Tennessee back in Hawaii. But Ziegler only had 5 also. So they kind of negated each other out. Who I'm looking at actually a little bit, someone who wasn't really talked about, I don't feel like enough. Fletcher Lawyer. Fletcher Loyer for Purdue had 27 points in this game. He was the difference for Purdue. Zach Edey's going to get his. We know what Zach Edey's going to do. He had 23 in that game against Tennessee, and he had 10 rebounds. But Fletcher Loyer went off for 27 points and hit 3 3-pointers, but was 7 for 18 from the field. So he had a very good game in 36 minutes for that. Whoever is guarding Fletcher Loyer cannot get lost in that zoom action that Purdue likes to run. And it's going to come a lot of times on a kick back out from Edey because Edey's enhanced his game as a passer. He's figured it out, and he's a big part of what they do offensively. He's not just big. He's actually a linchpin piece on how their offense works. So you're going to have to do something to where you're going to have to make sure both these primary guards are taken care of. Like, you can't let one get hot because that cost you the game back in Honolulu during the Maui Invitational. So if you got to figure out who that guy is going to be on defense. If you're Tennessee, I believe in the Tennessee defense. I believe it's good enough to do a lot of darn good things and beat a lot of good teams, but they've got to figure that matchup up, and they got to go back and they got to look at that Hawaii tape, and they got to figure out, how did we lose Loyer so much? Who did we have on him? Was that really the best matchup? So making sure that you have that proper matchup on whoever is going to be guarding Fletcher Loyer in that game.
For sure. And then another key that I noticed in this game against Creighton, that zone slowed down Tennessee so much, really helped
Connecting,
Creighton
it
kind
took
of make a run and get it back to even. So you got to think Purdue is going to try and utilize that. Um, could be an interesting way that Purdue closes out the game in that one, if Tennessee doesn't figure out a way around it.
Absolutely. And I think, honestly, as much of a scorer as Dalton Knecht is, and in this game, again, last time back when they played them on the islands, he had 16 points and he had a decent game against Purdue, but he's got to step up his game, not on the offensive end. He's got to step up his game on the defensive end, the best that he can. He's a decent defender, but he's definitely the weakest part of his game. And that's what NBA scouts have been talking about with him right now, with his draft stock and everything else, is like, the defense has to improve. So we're going to need to see Dalton Knecht step up and be a really good defender to make sure that he's taking care of some of these guards. He's got a lot of size. He can stop some of these threes, force people to shoot over you. Be that kind of big, rangy guard that you are, who can play out there on the wing, almost like a hybrid. So if he steps up his game defensively, that'll help a lot as well. So making sure we got two high-profile players playing in this matchup. People are going to be watching Knecht versus, Knecht and Zach Edey, that matchup, even though those two will probably never be in a matchup or anything but a mismatch situation on the court. But that'll be the thing that's entertaining for sure, is two high-profile players in that one. Well, Maddie, we mentioned it a couple of times. This is only the second time these programs have made the Elite Eight in school history. It's weird, right? That Tennessee and Alabama are making this situation and transitioning into this, or reach this pinnacle at the exact same time, and they're ending up in exact same situations in this rematches and Elite Eights and everything else. But looking back at history, this is as far as any team in school history has ever gotten for both these programs. And when you look at the rest of the SEC and the history that this conference has with all the teams, if you add in Texas and Oklahoma, whose seasons are over, so I'll start including them in some of the conversation now. All time, the SEC has got 6 teams that have at least made one Final Four. Then you got Oklahoma, who's been runners up, and then Arkansas, Florida, and Kentucky have all won national championships. Alabama and Tennessee this is some of the best basketball that their programs have ever had over this last decade. You're really asking, is this the tournament where they finally join the club with the rest of the conference at these levels? Because they've been at the best. They've been at the top of the conference for the last several years. Now, can they put their name in this piece of March history now? Can they break that ceiling that they've ran into in the past? And how far can they take this thing? Because it's an elite club once you get past that first Final Four game. There's only 4 teams who have ever won a Final Four game in the SEC when you include Oklahoma. So can they even join that club or whatever? Maddie, where's the ceiling at on Alabama and Tennessee?
At this point, I don't know what
Just
to do with
raise
my
the hand.
hands. Like it's crazy because we counted out Alabama. Um, Obviously a lot of us thought that they were going to lose in that UNC matchup. They overcame it. We've seen them make improvements. We've seen Nate Oates' excellent coaching style. As much as I want to say this is probably going to be their last game in the tournament, I don't know that for sure at this point. Um, Especially facing up against Clemson. Kind of like we said, a repeat matchup, a chance to go back and rewrite that game for them. And with Tennessee, if people have been watching the show, they know I picked them as my winner for this season. So, I think that they could make it at least to the national championship. The way UConn's been playing, don't know if they're gonna beat them out, but I see them at least making it to the national championship game. So I think at this point, like you said, Alabama's kind of playing on house money. They're just seeing how far they can go, but Tennessee, I think, has a lot more expectation riding on them.
I think so too. Alabama would be that team that's kind of against the norm of what you normally see in Final Four teams with that defense. As we talked about, I believe it was only three. I'll have to remember that trend, but it's either three or four teams have only made the Final Four who were outside the top 40 in adjusted defense. All those teams that made it outside the top 40 in adjusted defense in their first Final Four game lost that game, lost their very first game. And when you look above you in the bracket and you see the team that has been beating the tar out of has not been seriously challenged yet in 3 games in the NCAA tournament, just walking through this bracket and going to play their first real basketball game. It feels like their real first contest against Illinois, against an offense that's somewhat equivalent to them just north of you. It almost feels like Alabama's ceiling is as far as UConn will go. Like, if UConn wins, you feel like the ceiling's probably that Final Four game. There's a
Mhm.
chance, absolutely, you can beat Clemson. It almost feels like a coin flip in this rematch.
Yeah.
But the way Clemson's playing too, they're also really darn hot. I mean, this is the problem. The further you get down this bracket, all these teams are really, really hot. So it's hard to tell. But UConn feels like the cap. Like when you run into UConn, like I'm sorry, but this is where your season ends. The Dan Hurley has showed up, and yeah, it's over now. That was my experience last year in Las Vegas as a Razorback fan, and I think this UConn team might be better than last year's team, judging by some of these results. UConn has not lost or UConn has won every one of their tournament games in the last 2 years by double digits. Like it's crazy how well they're playing. So yeah, UConn looks darn scary. And I don't think Alabama fans are offended by me saying it's like, yeah, if you run into UConn in the Final Four, if you get past Clemson, I'm sorry.
Right.
There's no way I could conceivably tell you, yes, Alabama will run with them 100%. You can't if that offense is going, but like, yeah, it's scary. Like that feels like the cap. Um, no disrespect. No disrespect, Matt, Alabama. Like that is talking about UConn just being ridiculous. But for Tennessee, this game, this Elite Eight game feels like how far their ceiling's going. Because UConn's on the other side of the bracket for them. If they can beat Purdue, they've either got North Carolina State or Duke sitting on the other side of them. Duke's been kind of shaky at times. They're playing their best basketball right now, which helps. But like that's the only one seed that they will face until they reach a national championship game, and that would more than likely be UConn. Well, it will be UConn if a 1 seed makes it, but like if UConn, I would expect UConn to be in the national championship game at this point. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. All right, Maddie, let's do a quick walkthrough of like what's left of the 8 here. All right, just taking a real quick look at my little picks here that I made pre-bracket. So we have actually eliminated all my silver picks at this point, which kind of what we were kind of expecting. It's been moving in that direction. Was not shocked by the Iowa State Illinois game, but it is what it is. But what's really crazy is like the teams with very high ceilings, half of them made it or made it to this point. You got Alabama, Illinois, and Duke who all made it. I said these teams have very high ceilings, but had floors that could fall out on them at any point. And those teams are still, 3 of those teams are still around and they're still dancing. Out of the gold picks, you've only got you've only got Tennessee left. They're the last one standing. So they're in a pretty good spot. And then we've only lost one platinum now. And it was the platinum team that we thought would go out first, and that's Arizona. Tommy Lloyd's the same way. He's going to probably start hearing these Rick Barnes and Nate Oates comparisons of they only win in March. As long as he keeps making consistent teams, like I said, everybody's path can be different back when we talked about Tennessee. But that's where we are right now. The only team that I had outside of this was Clemson, and they were sitting in my under consideration. So I clearly should have not overreacted to the ACC conference tournament and eliminated or taken Clemson out of my group. Huge mistake on my part there. As
Or
far
NC
as
State?
do what?
Is it or NC State?
NC State. Sorry, NC State's not under consideration. They have to clearly. I did not have NC State, but they're the lone exception. They're the complete wild card that I had no expectation for in this tournament to be where they are right now. Out of the teams that are remaining in that week 6 poll, it's still trending very much that we may have another week 6 contender. We've still got Purdue, we've still got UConn, and we've still got Tennessee dancing. We lost a lot of them this week, but 3 out of the 8 teams are still in this situation where they can be where we will continue this trend out of the top 12 in that week 6 AP poll. Looks like UConn is the highest probability, but you still, like I said, got Purdue, who's probably second, and then Tennessee third to continue this trend. So a lot of those teams made it deep though, because like we didn't eliminate hardly anybody in the first 2 rounds. All right, let's go to these picks real fast. Maddie, Duke or North Carolina State? Who makes the Final Four?
I'm gonna go with Duke, but at this point, I don't know. Like NC State has just obviously shocked the world. But give me Duke for that one.
Yeah, I'm rocking with you. Like I get it. I'm picking Duke because that's the right pick. Like, but North Carolina State just refuses to lose right now. Like as a team that would not even made the tournament had they not, won the 5 games straight in the ACC tournament. Here they are, like trying to make a wonderful winning streak. The best winning streak of all time is what North Carolina State is chasing here. But yeah, they're close, but I would logically pick Duke in this one. That just seems like the right call for Duke to make the Final Four. And I hate that, but it's what it is. All right, Maddie, UConn or Illinois? Who you got in the
Give me
the
UConn.
buzzsaw? Yeah. Yeah, give me Dan Hurley. Yeah, incredible offense. The difference here is that I think UConn's defense, though, is much better than Illinois' defense.
Yep.
So I'm with you. I'm picking UConn in these other games. All right. Well, that is our wrap up of the Sweet 16. It's been crazy. It is well past midnight now, and I'm sure everybody, me and Maddie, want to go to bed. For y'all who are drinking coffee and everything in the morning, like what happened in the Sweet 16? Please like and subscribe to the Hoop Southbound Show. We greatly appreciate it. Or follow us anywhere that you get your podcast. It's real easy. Takes 10 seconds to do, and we greatly appreciate you guys being here talking hoops with us every week.